Episode of the InNOLEvation Mindset podcast powered by the Moran College of Entrepreneurship. I am Mark McNees, your host. And in studio today, we have the circularity and sustainability leader of Trane Technologies, Jenelle Shapiro, and the former CEO of Danfoss Turbocor, Ricardo Schneider. So welcome, guys. Thanks for coming in. We're going to start with you, Jenelle. Tell us a little bit about your career and what did you do before going to Trane Technologies, and just tell us about your journey.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Mac. Thanks, Ricardo, for having me today. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So I started my journey quite a handful of years ago. I've always been in the building sector. And my early career was in architecture. So that's where I had my undergrad in this BA in architecture from the University of Arizona, go Wildcats. And while there, I had a 5-year long journey in architecture, and I realized kind of early on that I didn't want to be a traditional architect, right? I thought architecture meant sitting behind the computer all day and drawing bathroom details. And what I do today, I don't draw bathroom details. I just sit behind the computer all day. But that's not what I wanted to do. So I transitioned into sustainability consulting. I really felt like there was a draw for me in my early days in architecture school of designing and building a home for a low-income family in Tucson, Arizona, and extending sustainability technologies and innovations and the design criteria into that methodology. And that's really what I drove through into most and really had the passion for. So I kind of pulled that string along throughout the rest of my career, which eventually brought me to where I am today. But along that journey, I've kind of had a couple of, leads throughout my career. And after consulting, I said, I want to work for a contractor. I want to kind of try and understand what does it mean to be a general construction company, and what does it mean to lead sustainability within that type of organization. So I had that perspective in the built environment, which then led me to working at Meta. So I worked at Meta for a handful of years in their data center design and construction sustainability team, really driving innovation and implementation at large scale across the North America brand of data centers for Meta. It was a fantastic job, but ultimately decided, that piece of kind of the ecosystem that was missing was the manufacturing side. While at Meta, I worked with our MEP, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing suppliers, and really, started to learn a little bit more about what did it mean to be a manufacturer and an OEM. And so I ended up getting a job at Trane Technologies, where I could really focus on my passion, which really came down to waste mitigation, resource management, and circularity. And that's my job today. So I lead circularity for Trane Technologies, and it's been a fantastic ride so far.
Fantastic. So for our audience that has no idea what circularity means, can you kind of explain what it means to lead circularity and sustainability?
Yeah, circularity at its most simplest core means how do you manage resources in the most effective way? How do you extend the life of products? In our case, that's what we build through multiple use phases. So reuse, repair, remanufacturability, et cetera. And so we really take that to heart as a company. We're an almost $22 billion organization. And really what circularity means for Trane Technologies is how can we build a roadmap and strategy within every business team and within every business org across our organization globally? So that's really what I'm, here to do. It's definitely an ambitious role, and when in many cases sustainability is a typical and common terminology across our org. That's how we're a mission-driven and value-driven organization by means of sustainability integration into all aspects of a company. Circularity is a new concept for many people. And so I have an uphill battle some days and just trying to educate and ensure that people understand this, but by integrating it into our business teams, by setting up KPIs and roadmaps to build out strategies and business value for the organization, that's how we'll, really see long-term success as a company.
Fantastic. And I'm going to move over to Ricardo. He has a question for you.
Jenelle, just for the audience to better understand our conversation here, can you just explain to our audience what a Trane Technology is? We all know about Trane air conditioning, Thermo King, but if you just give them a big picture about what Trane Technologies is about and what you guys are doing and the equipments and business that you are running around the globe.
Yeah, of course. So as I mentioned, we're almost a $22 billion business. We have about nearly 45,000 employees globally. We have three core businesses. So we have Trane Commercial, and that's everything, you can walk down to your corner market, and we might have a commercial system or chiller or actually kind of mechanism within that system, all the way up to data centers and anything in between size-wise. That's our commercial arm. We have a residential arm here in North America. And so a homeowner like yourselves may have a heating and cooling system branded by Trane Residential. And then we also do something very interesting. One of our brands is Thermo King. So TK, as we graciously call them, we have refrigeration systems that go on the side of trucks and trailers, planes, cargo ships, anything, basically to transport refrigerated vessels with our systems. And so in that case, we're mostly transporting feed, medicine, and other types of produce.
Okay. I just had one more question before we go over to Ricardo. Just what's the why behind what you do? Was there something that happened? Did you see something? Did you watch a documentary? Like, why is circularity and sustainability important to you as a person and as an executive?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of whys behind why I do what I do. I mean, I think one thing that comes to mind is there's a lot of data out there that talks about the circular economy and the impact that we have the potential to help to support. 100 billion tons of materials on an annual basis are consumed.
Hmm.
That's an exorbitant number of
Yeah.
materials, right? All types of materials. Yet only less than 7%, so 6.9% were actually cycled back within the economy and within the ecosystem. Basically, what that means is the remaining is virgin material that's extracted from the ground
Right.
to produce everything that we use and resource on a daily basis, right? So it's very complex, and I want to be a part of the solution to build out, why and how to develop better systems, better ecosystems, better solutions, better systematic changes within our own capabilities to really move that market and change that. On the other side, I'll say one more thing about that is Trane Technologies. We have a core goal of our business is to focus on sustainability with the potential to influence upwards of 50% of global emissions just by
Wow.
means of our products that we're putting out to market in the building sector and the transport sector itself. And so we really take this to heart and feel like it's a focus area that we need to ensure is implemented successfully.
Wow, that's incredible. So I'm going to go over to Ricardo. I know he has a lot of things to ask. So, Ricardo?
Thank you. And Trane Technologies is a global leader, and you have really set to yourself very ambitious targets, including doubling the circular materials that you use. Can you elaborate a bit more what that means, that you're going to double the circular materials that you use in your business?
Sure, yeah. So we just set these KPIs last year, so they're quite new and fresh. We've had a target and a commitment as an organization to design systems for circularity by 2030. This commitment was set forth back in 2019, quite some time, well before my time here. I've been here at Trane for 2 years. At that time, we had the foresight to say we need to do something around circularity. What that something is now finally starting to develop. And a lot of the reasoning behind that is people like me who can help lead and figure out what the strategy and roadmap for success looks like. But beyond that, there's a lot more in the industry to help support this evolution, right? And so for our company, the first goal is to double circular materials by 2030, measured off of the 2019 baseline. So it's basically saying, what is the consumer material inflows that are going into our products? And how are we going to ensure that those are recycled or renewable? Or how are we going to ensure that they're reused, repaired, or remanufactured, right? So we're quantifying that by weight, and we're measuring success between 2019 up to 2030. A big piece of that is really drivers related to our procurement strategy. So honing in on our procurement partners, our suppliers, and understanding how can we change the approach for supply chain resiliency and sourcing better materials. That's our first goal. You're going to get into our second goal. Second goal is actually revenue-based goal, which is kind of on the latter end, right, of material flows, X flows, right, coming out of our systems the value that's generated by means of us generating product or services which are considered circular. And so our goal there is to generate 10% of our overall revenue as a business by means of circular products and services. I think this is really, really unique. And the more we talked about this KPI internally, and got obviously the commitment from our leadership to execute this, we realized that a lot of companies weren't doing this, right? A lot of companies, I think, were a little bit fearful when it comes to talking about revenue and specifically leaning in on the fact that can we ensure that our products are considered sustainable and circular. Bottom line is Trane can. And so we really wanted to ensure that we have this as a core objective of our businesses. And it helps to drive change within our company, our business teams.
Great.
That's awesome. And can you elaborate a little bit more about, let's say, your focus in service or product as a service? I have seen some of the business that you have that you're now renting chillers, you are renting equipment, and you're running the assets. So this is, can you elaborate a little bit more about the service focus on the circular economy?
Yeah, services is a huge lever of ours when it comes to our circularity potential, both what we're doing and what we've been doing for many years, as well as the opportunity. So a couple of examples come to mind. We have programs within our service orgs globally. We call it our NOLE or TBA in different regions. There's a different naming convention for that. And what that is our overhaul and maintenance service offerings for our customers. So our technicians go out to the field and they service a large chiller. And they help to extend the life of those chillers, right? So a chiller may live for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, perhaps even, due to the fact that it's being maintained properly. Think of your car, right? Your car, you need typical maintenance guidelines and expectations. You bring it to the shop, they fix things, they ensure that this can live on for years to come. Same goes for a chiller. And so that's the functionality that we really bring in. We have a couple of service channels that help to recover refrigerant. So refrigerant is a big piece of the bloodline of our chillers, right? In order for a chiller to function, we need a refrigerant to cool down the system, to help to cool down. And so what that means is that at different intervals, recovery and reclaim of that refrigerant has to happen. And so our technicians will go out to the field, they will recover that refrigerant, and they will reclaim it with our partners. That's a really big key here is we had channels and supply partners who we send that recovered and reclaimed refrigerant to. And ultimately what that helps to do is ensure that we're not off-gassing or leaking into the atmosphere that in some cases, pollutants and high GWP refrigerants. And instead, we're recovering that. And then downstream, we're able to also actually purchase some of that refrigerant for certain regions and certain states. We're required to have a certain percentage of our refrigerant purchases to be CRRs, called certified recycled refrigerant. And so we'll purchase that upstream and get those back into our chillers as well. Just a couple of examples, we do a lot in the service org, and I think one thing that you just mentioned, Ricardo, related to rentals. Yes, so we had a rental fleet globally where we either manufacture new systems for that rental fleet, or we also buy back from our customers existing equipment. We refurbish it and repair it. We get it up to working order, and then we'll put those systems into our fleet, and then we use them for as long as viable as potentially viable, and to ensure that we can also upgrade those systems over time to the highest energy efficiency standards, or overhaul them as needed to ensure that they're working functionally for our customers.
Awesome.
That's fantastic, Janelle. And you mentioned a couple of times about partners and collaboration, and how important is, in your opinion, in terms of circular economy, to work in systems, and people look at not more in silos, but look at the whole chain, and then the whole from let's say from the raw material back to recovering or repairing stuff or retrofitting. So how you see this new needed to work more close to each other and collaboration between the different players?
Honestly, it's essential in the circular economy to work as a systems approach, right? We have to ensure that our suppliers upstream are feeding us the right materials, that our partners downstream are recovering our systems in the most effective and environmentally conscious way. And then in the middle there, we have to make sure that we're operating these systems effectively, and we can pull certain core components out of these systems. We can remanufacture those as needed and get them back into the ecosystem. So yes, it's a key emphasis for the way that we function as a company. And it's a key priority for us to ensure that, it's not just our sustainability and circularity objectives that are intended to be met, but it's also our partners too. And so we work a really, really close collaboration with key partners, a lot of them being in the metal business, in the metal industry, right? So most of our materials that go into chillers are high valued, high weight is in metals. So our copper, our aluminum, our steel. We do have some plastics in our systems as well. Obviously, refrigerants. I mean, if you think about how we're packaging these goods too, right? What are we putting around the system to protect it in shipments? Those are all kind of key levers for us, and those are all the essential partners, a part of the system that are helping us enable our own circularity objectives.
That's really interesting. I was just wondering, as you were speaking, we talk about like the global supply chain and just how a lot of manufacturers obviously are using the global supply chain. And sometimes it's hard for accountability when you are buying all around the world, right? How do you ensure that your partners are doing what they say that they're doing and adhering to the principles, the high principles that Trane Technology has set?
It's a wonderful question. And to be totally transparent, something we ask ourselves quite often, right? When it comes to measuring our success, data, authenticated data, visibility, transparency of the inputs that we're putting into this system are incredibly important. And so we do rely on our suppliers to give us credible, quantifiable numbers when it comes to emissions, when it comes to their expectations and their consumables, or what's the raw consumption value and recycled inputs for these materials, right? So I think we're learning along the way. We've been reporting our recycled content percentages for, I think, the past 4 years or so. And so those numbers are going up, and they're going up for a couple of reasons. I'd say the first is we've been transparent conversation with those key suppliers that we feel are the kind of the linchpins or the leverage points in which will require us to build and ensure the most success. So that's part of it. And we're also teaching and training them. So we have incredibly robust procurement strategies and partners who internally focus in on how do we ensure our partners are ready and able to support our needs and our data needs, and give them the tools and the teaching and the outlets to be able to get to that point of verifiable, credible data.
Wonderful. Thank you. And I just wanted to do a follow-up question. So just to put it in context, one of the grad classes that I teach is measuring impact, and we spend all day long in GRI reports and all sorts of stuff. I was just wondering, on a personal level, are you required, when you said emissions, are you asking them for scope 1 and 2? Or are you asking for scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions? Like, how detailed are you getting?
Yeah, it's the 3 emissions. So we have an embodied carbon 40% reduction target. That's not a target. It's a tangential target to our circularity target of designing systems for circularity, meaning they feed off of each other. So the value and the benefits of us encouraging our suppliers to procure and build out the capacity and the capabilities to increase the recycled inputs and scrap resourcing will ultimately reduce our embedded carbon, but it also helps us with our circular material growth, right? So they kind of work together, and it's definitely something that we focus in on and expect.
Awesome. Well, Ricardo has a question for you.
Just to clarify, science-based target, a lot of companies are signing up, and how Trane Technologies approach, let's say, I know that you have been this for a while. You have signed up for science-based targets, and you're reporting your data. So are you encouraging your suppliers? Are you encouraging your partners to sign up for the science-based targets, or how you work with these kind of standard measurements and making sure that everybody is measuring equally and being fully transparent?
Yeah, we are not holding our suppliers accountable to SBTi. We are holding ourselves accountable to it at this point. We likely, in the future, might approach it where we put some more emphasis and expectation from our supply stream to do that. But right now, it's really holding on us to kind of figure out how can we measure this, how can we set these ambitious targets, but beyond that, how can we start to address SBTI's expectations. We have a commitment called the Gigaton Challenge, and the Gigaton Challenge specifically is something around us on our use of sold products, right? So scope 3 emissions, use of sold products, and figuring out how we can help reduce 1 gigaton of emissions for our customers. And so it's really important there is like we are looking in ways on how to redesign our equipment to really go full head of steam on this, right? So high efficiency products, electrification, right? Changing our portfolio of product lines to be electric. Energy efficiency is obviously key here and trying to transition the future product development. And then also a big lever there is GWP of the refrigerants. So global warming potential is GWP. And how do we help to transition out from high GWP refrigerants to lower alternatives and build out the innovation capabilities across that? So that's where we lean in on kind of our products for our customers. And then we have our other commitment, which is where Circularity sits in most directly, which is our leading by example commitment. And so that one in particular addresses kind of scope 1, 2, and 3. It addresses our operational goals as a business, right? How can we change our manufacturing facilities to ensure we have carbon neutral operations? How can we ensure that we're putting renewables our facilities or engaging in PPAs and other types of agreements to expand renewables in those local regions? Electrifying our fleet. Those are some big key areas on our operational goals. And then on the other side of that, or more so related to my work in scope 3 is how do we ensure that our products are low carbon alternatives, right, through the supply chain and through the entire life cycle of our products, and really integrating security across each of those impact areas.
I love it. That's fantastic. And what part of the circular economy, in your opinion, is the most challenging? Is the rethinking? Is the reuse? The repair? What is the most challenging when we look at the whole concepts around circular economy, and the one that's the hardest to apply?
They're all hard in their own light. I will say if I had to take maybe 1 or 2 of the areas and out of 6 circularity pillars, recycling might be the hardest. And that's weird to say, but I want to say that because that recycling R is the most known one, right? Everybody, no matter who you are, knows what it means to recycle. But what people might not be aware of is the history of the recycling infrastructure and industry is not set up for success. It's not set up for ease of disassembly. It's not set up for kind of the very complex mixed materials that we have within the HVAC industry. And so I think that really makes it hard for us to figure out at end of life, as an example, how do we most effectively recover these really valuable material-rich entities that don't have a system in place to be able to do that today at a cost-neutral comparison, right? So that's why I bring up recycling. And if I had to say one more, I would say maybe the material procurement or material selection side of things is also really, really difficult. We work very, very closely with our procurement and supply chain teams to understand not just buy potential, meaning what within our metals industry can we buy with higher recycled content. We also work with our materials and chemistry, our researchers, right, our scientists to figure out, well, we can buy this, but can we actually put it into our chiller?
Mhm.
Is it going to degrade the chiller over time faster, or is it going to have corrosion types of issues, right? So you have to kind of think of the whole picture there. And so this material selection gets really complex. And it's hard for us to really scale that, yet we are, we're looking to do that. And that is part of our goal and commitment for our circular material growth.
That's fantastic.
And what are you most excited about?
Yeah, I'd say some of the value is highest, as well as what I'm most excited about is probably in the remanufacturing space. Remanufacturing, if the listeners may not understand or know what that word means. So basically, the heart of a chiller is the compressor.
Mm-hmm.
So our services teams will go out and maintain our equipment, like I mentioned. And at that same time, there might be a need to remove that existing compressor and do some repair works on it in order to get that chiller fully functional. So they will remove that from at the customer's site. They will ship it. In the case of North America, they will ship it to our Charlotte remanufacturing plant. At Charlotte, we have trained and very, very skilled labor technicians who will disassemble that entire compressor to literally the nuts and the bolts of it. They'll pull every single piece apart and they'll clean it. They'll clean it, they'll repair it, anything that's been damaged. They'll replace some of the kind of consumable materials, things like rings or gaskets, seals and bearings. And then they'll also use the core structure that existed, right, in the first place,
Mm-hmm.
and reuse those. So there's like the crankshaft or the motor, the rods, the pistons, those types of things. And so what it becomes is, then let's put it all back together. And what it becomes is this usable, remanufactured compressor that's just like new. It's just not technically new. And so some of this is like a mental shift
Right.
for consumers as to this is a compressor that can now be reinstalled back at our customer site.
Mm-hmm.
It's a reman compressor. It costs less to the consumer, right? And to a customer. And it ultimately becomes recurring revenue for us because it becomes a place in which we're not necessarily having to sell a new compressor or go out to a supplier to buy that compressor. We have the infrastructure, we have the core already accessible and available to us to get back in. So that's the concept of remanufacturing. And we do this globally for both Thermo King, so our on-road transportation refrigeration systems, as well as for our commercial technologies. And we do this really, really well. Last year, we did more than 10,000 total parts will be manufactured across the globe, which is huge. We have a lot of opportunity, though, to also scale. So when you ask, what else can we do more in this space, that's what we can do more. So I'm excited about it because there's a lot of opportunity, and I also see a lot of business value, and it brings in recurring and consistent revenue to our service teams.
Yeah, it sounds like you guys have really put a lot of thought into that, and it's really kind of a emerging model for other manufacturers. So that's really great to hear. I believe Ricardo had a question for
No,
you.
it's a great point, Janelle, that let's say remanufacturing, let's say it's needed and it's a good business. But also, let's say for a new product, let's say the design intent of manufacturability has to be there, because let's say there's many ways to make make easy to people to repair, people to recover parts, and let's say, can you elaborate a little bit more? Let's say how you guys are focused on this design intent, the design for remanufacturing, design for circular economy.
Yeah, that's really important.
Yeah, and it takes a focus first on the remanufacturing side of design. You hit it spot on, Ricardo. Without ensuring upstream, our engineers, our PGTs, our product management groups and teams are ensuring remanufacturability is even feasible, then what do you have at the end? You have something that's obviously not remanufacturable, right? We've actually been doing a lot of research on this process designed for remanufacturing. And we've partnered with some universities recently to develop a CAD plugin. And basically with the philosophy of, if we ensure that at new product development, at that phase early on, that there is a health score and there is a methodology on grading a piece or component to their manufacturability criteria based on historic data and historic kind of evidence of what fail rates are and other types of issues that we might see downstream. This CAD plugin helps to kind of give the solutions and the tools and the capability offerings to our design teams to mitigate those risks upstream. That's a big piece of what we're doing internally with our engineering work and with our manufacturing teams. I will say you also asked the question a little bit about designing in general for circularity. And so to respond to that, we have a tool we call the DFSC, the Design for Sustainability and Circularity module. Basically what this is doing new product development and new products coming to market. And we've identified those with our engineering and product development teams. And at the beginning of each year, and along we're back to define those, we have a module that addresses a handful of circularity and sustainability items, such as how are you able to repair this item? What is the core inputs to this item? Meaning, what is the composition of materials? What type of metals are you putting in? How highly recyclable can they be? What is the serviceability of these products? So we asked a lot of stimulating questions upfront during the design phase in order to ensure that the team is thinking about it and that they're also graded on it. So there's a score that populates from this, and the teams are expected to present this with leadership at every gate review phase in order to understand what are they doing that's working, what are the capabilities and things that they might be roadblocks or risks to the business that we might need to work together in order to figure out solutions for, and how to build a better mousetrap really is what the intent there is.
That's really interesting. I was just wondering, as far as like on the engineering side, circularity is, I guess, really old, but then it got forgotten and it's being re-envisioned now. What has been some of the biggest pushbacks that you've heard, not necessarily at Trane Technologies, but just kind of like industry wide and at Meta and just kind of in your career when you're talking about circular economy and you're talking about sustainability and things like that? What are kind of the typical, well, we would like to do that, but things?
You always see the comment in the sustainability space on it costs more, right? That's always something that we hear. And it's no different to the manufacturing space. I think it is a little different to Trane for sure, because our people believe in this. They understand this. We have mechanisms internally for performance and incentives for us to drive change related to sustainability and circularity. So we always get that question, or that commentary. And so I think when it comes to circularity, I think that the biggest kind of hitting misconception sometimes is that it costs more. But the reality is, for a circular economy to work effectively, it actually builds more value and more revenue for a business. You just have to figure out where that input is and where that capability needs to be built and develop the business capabilities and or business plan and financial model to prove that is feasible, right? So we've proven that that's feasible within our company. I've talked about remanufacturing. We've been doing remanufacturing for 50 years. So it's something that we see as a business imperative and a business strategy to build growth within our company. We've been doing our renewal and TBA services, which is our overhaul maintenance operations and services, for more than 20 years. Wow. So again, these are well-established business models and capabilities that large companies like ourselves have proven to be successful in, and therefore kind of gotten away from the nomenclature of it costs more.
Right.
Yeah, but I think also here, if you can share with us that we have seen over and over the young generation, they are much more in on this sustainability. They are much more in on the whole value chain, let's say, and how excited you see the new engineers coming, the new business development people. People are coming with a different mindset, because I think that's also, let's say, a shifting mindset that is going on as we are speaking. So how you see this new generation get engaged and get super excited about what we're talking about?
Yeah, I think you're totally right. When I was going to school, there weren't majors in sustainability in my undergrad time, right? Now, fast forward quite a few years, I would say many universities, if not all universities, have something on the environmental or social responsibility or sustainability topic, which is wonderful in all different types of business areas. So not just for engineers of the building sector, right? Any type of sector,
Yes.
there is a focus on this. We see that with our new hires. You're right; they do come with a lot more excitement, maybe about this topic. Then I worked for 7 years in the construction industry. For 7 years, I worked with people who had history 30, 50 years in their career being, a foreman or superintendent out in the field. And they do their job the way that they've always done their job. And they're not totally interested in kind of seeing a different light. I think there is a shift, even in construction, and obviously also manufacturing, with the old way worked for them then, but is not necessarily working for them now. And they're willing to look at a more systematic approach to build kind of long-term value and resiliency and success for organizations that may look different than it had been for quite some time in their early career days.
Thank you for that. Ricardo and I were fighting over who got to respond, but I'm holding the producer hat here. So I actually wanted to selfishly, as the director of social and sustainable enterprises at Florida State, we worked really hard speaking with a lot of sustainability executives like yourself, and we tried to build a program so when our graduates graduated, they could go into sustainability and be competent and ready to go day one. So if I was having that conversation with you, and when you're looking at bringing people into your department or your world, or even just kind of like the sustainability space, what kind of skills are you seeing that are lacking that you're like, wow, I wish they got that in grad school, or I wish they got that in college?
I think some of it comes back to the concept of data and kind of carbon and material literacy, right?
Mhm.
So in so many instances, people want to know where the numbers come from, where and why we are pitching or talking about some certain operational
Right.
change or benefit. And they need to know the numbers behind that in order to sign on the dotted line to assure that they're comfortable with that. And so I think, and not to say many years ago that wasn't a way of thinking, but I think it really is maybe a core focus now, because we make data-driven decisions today, right? And when we think about the long-term, big picture value of a lot of these circularity activities, you also need to measure it against what's the carbon impact to this, because
Right.
people are aware of what that means, and they can somewhat relate it to either their day-to-day personal life or their career, perhaps. And so you need to be able to measure what the carbon impact of this is. I will say one thing, it is really hard in the circularity space to do this, because there's not approaches when it comes to carbon accounting to take into consideration things like reuse.
Mhm.
So we developed EPDs, or environmental product declarations, for our products. Reuse is a piece of it, but it's not within the product category rules, a expectation. And the way to calculate that, it's difficult to kind of come to the impetus of like, what is the value of reusing a component versus buying new. And so putting the data behind that, we've tried, and we've been doing a lot of work to kind of progress our own skills and capabilities on this topic. But I think the industry as a whole, not just Trane Technologies, has a long-term time to kind of get to a point where that carbon and material literacy is at a point where we can tell that full circularity story in the most effective way.
Yeah, that's one thing I think is a gap in our reporting, is companies that they don't get to report on the energy savings that their product are making. And I've heard that a lot from sustainability people. It's like, well, we have to report how much we're using, but we don't get to report how much we're saving, which is a big deal when you look at companies like Danfoss and Trane Technologies and stuff like that. They're saving tons of CO2 emissions and things like that. So I'm going to go back over to Ricardo, because I'm a good host, gracious host. So Ricardo.
So we talk about people driven by, let's say, rewards, and rewards drives behaviors. So how Trane Technologies create incentives to people, say, to deliver results regarding circular economy? How you create KPIs and how you create reward metrics to make sure, let's say, that people get reward by achieving and overachieving goals for the circular economy.
Yeah, I love this question. I think it's key to integrate these capabilities and incentive structures within large organizations like ourselves to actually build change. And so what Trane Technologies has done is leaders up to a certain level and beyond are annually, on an annual basis, had incentives with sustainability modifiers attached to those, which basically what that means is there's metrics and thresholds that have to be met on our Gigaton challenge and different energy efficiency product development on the design side, as well as circularity objectives, that if met at the end of each year, there'll be a multiplier to our annual incentive package. And so that is really, really imperative. On top of that, we also have sustainability goals for every person within the company that have to be set at the beginning of each year. So no matter if you work online at the manufacturing plant, or you're an engineer, or you're an executive, you have to set a tangible, targeted, sustainability-driven goal. And you are measured against that during your annual performance review cycles. And so I think what this helps to do is a couple things. It helps to reward good behavior towards sustainable and circular change. It also looks to bring awareness, especially for circularity. I mentioned that the term circularity in some cases is not widely known. Sustainability is, but circularity not as much. And so by bringing this to the forefront, money talks, right?
Mhm.
To make it actionable, it allows people to embody kind of those expectations within themselves and perform in a way that they might not have already had thought of in the prior, and bring kind of awareness to this methodology and your approach to our business.
Fantastic.
That's fantastic. Yeah, and
Is
I
that-
think, let's say, that Trane is leading. I haven't seen I haven't seen not too many companies with this very comprehensive approach on the circular economy, sustainability, down to rewarding programs. That's really remarkable.
Yeah, I'm asked a lot by my students, why do most companies don't do this, right? Because we're talking about it, and this is my opinion. So those of you who are connected with it, this is my FSU, this is my opinion. I think the whole system, I'm a capitalist, but one of the Achilles heels of capitalism is that we reward people on quarterly profits, not long-term sustainability or change or value added. And I think I read that the average executive in corporate America is at a company for a couple of years. So that's eight quarters that they're not thinking 20, 30 years down the line and things like that. And I think basically our system, and I love what Trane Technologies is doing, is rewarding the executives who are making the right decisions for future generations and the planet and things like that. And I'd love to see more of that. When you look at your industry and you look at other industries, I know in America it's a lot different than Europe, and there's ebbs and flows and things like that. Like, how optimistic are you about the sustainability movement in business in general?
I'm optimistic, but maybe I sit in a silo because of what company I work for,
Mhm.
right? Trane Technologies has not shied away from our commitments and our sustainability objectives. We are a global climate innovator, and that's what we lead with. So in all instances, we integrate sustainability across our company as a mechanism to build revenue and long-term success as a company. That is what we lean in on. There are many companies, given the kind of climate and regulatory, political stuff that's going on, that have shied away and stepped back to their commitments. We've
Mhm.
actually stepped forward, I would say. We've committed even on more things, especially last year, right? As an example, these Circularity KPIs we made public, and we are leaning in on those commitments. and doubling down on what we feel like we can do as a business when it comes to this topic. So we're not scared to do that, but we look at the larger industry beyond just HVAC, just in general. I will say there's definitely a shift. There is definitely a learned apprehension when it comes to integrating those in large corporates.
Great. Thank you so much for that. I just want to shift gears as we're winding up. So again, both of us work at FSU, but specifically we're in the College of Entrepreneurship. So I wanted to ask you a couple of entrepreneurial questions, and especially, we have thousands of students who are entrepreneurs going to watch this. So where do you see the biggest entrepreneurial opportunities in the future in the circular economy?
Couple things come to mind. One is around advanced disassembly. I spoke a bit about kind of the difficulty of the recycling infrastructure as we see it today. And I think a part of that is because there's not cost neutral or cost comparative alternatives and technologies that exist today around advancing the disassembly of very difficult and complex equipment like HVAC. So that is one area I definitely think that we could use a lot of innovation in, as well as investment and capability building. Another one I think of that I think is really important is you think of all types of industries. You think of apparel, you think of food, you think of industrials like ourselves. Kind of this material marketplace,
Right.
I think is a really big topic of conversation, right? Making it easy for a consumer like myself or like you to bring something back, to get it repaired, to go buy something that's been used, right? The ease of this whole process and the systems approach, and tying in an effective way all of the people of this puzzle and the people of this kind of model that have to be a part of it to build that to be successful and again easy is really, really, really difficult. But I think that's a huge opportunity. I think that's a key piece of the circular economy that has to be solved in order to ensure that this becomes long-term and a stable implementation across our companies as well as any of the industries.
Yeah. And here's another, my opinion thing. I would love to see companies do what you do and take responsibility for the end of life port when they're engineering it, really think about it. I actually would go so far, again, my opinion, that companies should be held responsible for the end of life of their products. And I think that things would change very quickly.
But if I could, I respond to that.
Absolutely.
I agree with you. And I think we are seeing a lot of change in regulations and policies here in the States, as well as definitely in the EMEA region, which are holding OEMs and manufacturers like ourselves accountable for end of life. What those policies are coming out in the form of are EPRs, or extended producer responsibilities. And so it is the expectation of manufacturers to responsibly recover their systems, their materials, their components, whatever it may be at end of life. What we're doing right now is we're exploring business capabilities to operationalize this, to figure out how can we recover our large systems and chillers, right, out in the field, disassemble those in the most cost-effective, cost-neutral way, and get those core components back into our supply chain to build out that resiliency and build out the capabilities within our partners as well. And so we are seeing on the regulation side more demand than ask, and we're being proactive. We are not being held accountable for our chillers today, but we do foresee maybe in the near future we will. And so we're establishing kind of what that roadmap and plan for success to operationalize this type of end-of-life recovery system long-term.
So I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but I do have two questions left, and hopefully they're kind of succinct. This is for the students. If you could give our students in sustainability here at FSU one insight about just going into this industry, and you kind of like wish you knew, I guess, before you went into it. What would you tell our students that would kind of have them go with their eyes wide open?
Be ready for data. Be ready to create your capabilities and your skills to manage data literacy. Understand material flows within a large company is incredibly complex. And so being able to kind of hone in on where those scopes and boundaries are in which you want to assess to prove either business model capability or to run some type of KPI analysis, whatever that may be, depending on what your demand and your output is. I think that's really, really key.
Okay, great. And now I'm going to get a little more personal and drill down. If you could go back before you went into sustainability industry and being the circularity and sustainability leader at Trane Technologies and all that, and before Meta and before construction, and you could beam back and you were allowed to tell yourself one thing, what would you tell yourself?
So I pick two things.
Sure.
I hope you're okay with this answer. Okay. I think first is surprisingly, sustainability professionals also need to be communications professionals.
Mm-hmm.
And I never knew that. I went to grad school for sustainability, and I don't think that was a core focus or a core kind of output from what I learned. But in application, once you have this type of job, you need to be able to clearly, succinctly, and comprehensively speak about the value that it brings to both internal and external stakeholders. So be a communications professional and expert. And the other thing I would say, just to end with, is don't be scared or fearful of speaking up and speaking out. I think the way that I've been successful in my career is I'm not scared to go talk and knock on the door of our CEO or of our project engineer. Like, I will go out of my way to initiate any conversation that I think is imperative to build success and build momentum and build the innovation that you want to set forth for your organization. I think that's given me a lot of opportunities, but it's also challenged me and it made me, understand that it's imperative to be vocal about what you believe in and be able to show up and step up and be confident in your capabilities and your skills to leverage and build that transition and change within any company.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for spending your time with us. I know the students and other people who listen to the podcast and watch the podcast are going to really appreciate just your insight and you sharing your experience and then all the really cool things that Trane Technology is doing. Hey, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the InNOLEvation Mindset podcast powered by the Moran College of Entrepreneurship. Hey, if you liked this episode, which how could you not? Hit that like button and be sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss another amazing episode. We'll see you next time.